All right, hello again, and welcome to the last but not least session of the day. I think I've talked about it a few times now, and I've talked about Chris as well, who joined me here. Maybe a quick introduction. So Chris is our senior product manager for TradeAware. So he has basically built the product. Obviously, he didn't do it alone, but Chris actually helped me during my onboarding as well because he has a legal background. So I think combining obviously product knowledge, but also legal background is just the right thing for the EUDR. Chris will obviously tell you a bit more about TradeAware, show you a demo, but obviously feel free to ask him any question about the EUDR in general. Obviously, this is the last session of today, so maybe in the end we will have a bit more time for a Q&A session than we had during the day. But as I said a few times already, we will take all the questions with us. Probably it's going to be kind of a weekend session to answer them by now, but we will do it happily so that all of you will be happy with the answers as well. And that being said, again, welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to close out the day, sort of headlining the festival. I don't know. Anyway, but I'm sure at this point a lot of conversation has already happened around EUDR and maybe with the occasional reference to our solution TradeAware. So that's what I want to take you through today, is how we're approaching the problem of EUDR with TradeAware. So you've probably heard a lot about the different challenges that are associated with EUDR. We, on the TradeAware platform, we see that as basically breaking down into 3 high-level phases of work that you need to do, with sort of 6 steps across that. So the first point being, you need to gather data. And then what does that look like? That looks like gathering the geolocation information, the plot data. As has probably been discussed, that's a very challenging step. And our approach to that is to use something we call our commercial network. So you can get data from your suppliers and they can get it from their sub-suppliers and so on and so forth. And then, of course, there's also the legality aspect of EUDR. And for that, you need to go and gather quite a lot of information from your suppliers about what is going to show the compliance with the local law of production. And that's where we have the capability around questionnaires. You need to take that data and then assess the risk that's associated with it. And for that, we have deforestation assessment, and that really makes use of our precision analytics, which is has been specially built for EUDR by LiveEO, and then perform a risk assessment and actually decide what you make of all this data together, whether you think the supplier is compliant or non-compliant, whether you think you can get to that level of saying there's a non-negligible risk here associated with the supplier. And then, of course, you need to wrap that data up and provide it to tracers. I see there's been a lot of questions about this already. The way that we handle that is to use a module that we call transaction management, which allows you to tie together your supplier data to individual products and shipments, and then to pass that to EU tracers via the integration that we have. One thing that I'd emphasize here as well is that what you're going to see is a combination of things that you can do via our application, so in our user interface, but also given the interaction with this and sort of business as usual processes, there's also the option to work with our API as well to integrate it into other systems that you're already using. And then what might that look like? So just to show what those 6 pieces look like together, a common use case we're seeing is people interacting via ERP systems, where you, of course, have a lot of your product data already, your purchase orders, your sales orders, and then conducting a supplier review on TradeAware of the plot data, of the questionnaire data, of our precision analytics for deforestation, of the risk assessment that's being powered by CMS, who have already spoken today. And then once you have that, using that as something that you can base your transaction, your operational flow on. So at that point, once you've made an assessment of the supplier, letting the transaction management side flow through and into EU tracers. And with your supplier being able to come on board and add that plot information, add that questionnaire information, and invite their sub-suppliers for information as well. So if that's what it conceptually looks like, let's take a real example and go into a demo. So what I want to show you here is what this would look like for if we have a supplier who we'll call LiveEO demo supplier here, which is the account that I have, and what it would look like for them to place on the market a product that they've bought from a company that we'll look at called Green Canopy Oil. So this is the account. This is the homepage for TradeAware for this company. And you can see that you've got some of the tools associated with this as well. So if we come in here, you can see you can invite other users to the platform for collaboration. And you can also see you can access the developer tools as well. Of course, everything that we're going to look at here today is in our application, but is also possible via our API as well. So the first point of call that you probably have is how do you start gathering data? And the main use case we have for this is our commercial network. As I said, this is a way of gathering information from your suppliers, and they can pass these requests on to their suppliers. And so let's look what it looks like to send an invitation. So I have a supplier here that I want to invite, which is Green Canopy Oils. So let's go in here. We can add multiple invitees, but we will send this to them. And we can see that invitation has gone out now. If we come into our notifications, we can see which ones we've received and which ones have been sent, and we can see the one to Green Canopy Oils is now gone. Now, if we switch to their profile, you can see that they've been invited. So they get this email saying that Chris Bell wants to connect with them from LiveEO demo supplier, and they can go in and accept this invitation. So I have to set a password. And then they can log into the system. Accept terms and conditions, of course, always very important. And then we can start including the suppliers. So let's say we are working with and they are from Green Canopy Oils. And then we've got some copy and paste to speed this process up as well. Of course, if you're fortunate like us to use an app like Dashlane to help with your password management, it will keep showing up. Indonesia. And then we also have the option here to add identifiers if they plan on creating due diligence statements. So you can add your VAT number or your EUDR number. Again, I see this has come up as a conversation a lot. This enables them to then be able to create due diligence statements. As we're a supplier outside of the EU, we're not going to do that today. And then I get asked if I want to import plots of land. Let's skip that for now. And you can see here, I have my notification and I can see the request from the demo supplier. And I can go to that buyer and see their information, see who's invited me. Okay, so let's add some plots to share with that supplier. And you see my plots of land list is empty at the minute. And then I can go and search for an area. So I could go to an area that's used for palm oil production. And I could go in. And then I have the options of either drawing a plot or importing a plot. So I could draw a plot here and add the name and the crop associated with it. But the much more common use case we see is people uploading these. So let's go to import some plots. And then we'll say which commodities associated with it. And then what we can see is we've got those two plots and they've immediately been checked against the JRC map, which is the EU Global Forest Cover map. And we can see both of those are showing no overlaps with that. So now I've uploaded the plots that I want to add. I can also see a documents tab to be able to provide some information to my supplier about my compliance with the legality side of EUDR. And this is what's been designed by the partner law firm that we're working with of CMS. So let's go in and let's do one of these risk assessments. So we're answering for Indonesia. Again, a little helpful bit of copy and paste for some of the longer bits of information. And we can upload some files as well. And then go through answering these questions. So let's just, for the sake of speed, we can just go through these and mark these as no. There's also conditional questions. If you do mark them in a certain way, that it'll open up another question to ask you additional questions and for additional information. And then at the end, you get the option to save and close. And then I can come out of this as somebody who's uploaded their information now. And I can see at the minute it's in draft status and it's only available to me. And then I can go in to edit it, make any changes I want to, and finally submit it. And then I'll be asked just to confirm that I'm ready to share this with the buyer who's requested it from me. And we hit submit and share. And we can see that we've now shared this risk assessment and we've shared our plots of land as well. So this is it for Green Canopy Oils. They've shared their information. Let's go back in as me, as the original buyer, and see what I see now. So if I come back into the application, I've got the data now from Green Canopy Oils. I can see those 2 plots of land that they've uploaded. I can come down and I can see the documents that they've uploaded as well. So let's go in and look at those plots. So we can see both of those don't overlap with the EU Global Forest Cover Map. And then we can also decide to mark an assessment against these. So it might be we want to put them in review. It might be that we want to do some risk mitigation against them, or it might be that the case being that we think actually these are compliant, and we can add a note against this. We'll just simply change the status. And then we can see what's been changed and who's done it in the Activities tab. And we can do that for both of them because we see there's no overlap. And then just to look at an example of one where you might have gone a little deeper on this, we could come in and see some of these examples from another supplier who's uploaded plots. And we can see one here where we have the EU map is showing quite a high overlap of 66%. But then we performed TradeAware precision analysis on it. And you can see that if we saw that associated with it, we would have a red color as well. But we can see that for TradeAware precision, this area, we found that it was an existing palm oil plantation as of the cutoff date for the regulation. And our analysis there is using a much more sort of a method that's much more aligned with the regulation, looking at land use change between natural forest and plantation as of the cutoff date, and has been able to distinguish that actually what we see here is allowable within the regulation as well. Okay, so we've looked at our plots for Green Canopy Oil, and we can come in and we can look at the documents they've uploaded. We can view the information they've provided, or we can also go back and download the full package of information. And then once we've looked at all of that and made a decision, we can come in here, we can click on them, and we can make that assessment. So we could say they're under review. We could say they're ready for assessment. Let's say we update the status. We also have the statuses around our partner CMS in terms of performing an assessment and completing an assessment. But let's say that we're completed and we've decided that they're EUDR compliant. And we can go in and we can save any of those notes against this and see those. So if that's what it looks like to get the data and then to assess the data, then the final phase is then to submit a due diligence statement. And that's where our transactions tab comes in. So you can see here, we've got an already submitted one, but we can come in and create a new one here. It's associated with our partner, Green Canopy Oils. So let's say we're importing it, bringing it to Germany. And then we just need to know the HS code. Let's say it's glycerol. And that we are importing 1,000 kilograms of that. We can update the product name if we want to. And then we can select the supplier associated with this. And what our system does is it takes all the information that's associated with me as a business that's needed for traces. It takes all the data that's associated with that supplier that we've selected, and it combines it and sends it to EU traces. We can, of course, add more products, more commodities, more suppliers associated with this as well. And we can submit that. And then what we see if we go into the traces side, if we were to look at this example here that we've already sent, which is also for glycerol, we can come into traces and see that that was submitted with the operator name that we have here, LiveEO demo supplier, and all of the plots associated with the supplier that we had in here are available in traces. Okay, great. So that's very much it. We think we put together a very sort of simple but comprehensive system that covers all of the different aspects you need to go from gathering your data, assessing your risk, and proving that product compliance onto the EU. But happy to talk more and take some questions as well.
Yes, thank you so much already. And there are actually some questions. So again, we will go probably through all of them. I will try to put them in order. Maybe first one, I think this was a question from the beginning. And you probably read it by now. So maybe, Chris, you can elaborate on this a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a great question. This is one of the main challenges that, of course, people have in this space is being able to reduce the risk of a false positive or a false negative. When we see on the false positive side, the risk is, of course, that if you find deforestation where there isn't any, it's liable to have a massive impact on those in the supply chain. And a false negative, of course, carries the risk of non-compliance. The way that we handle this is to have, we really rethought the way that we approach the analytics and sort of started from the ground up. And so our focus has been on using both, was to basically use what we call a spatio-temporal approach. So to look both at changes over time and changes in the texture of an area to be able to define whether or not it's agricultural or whether it's natural forest. And you can see even in the demo, it's quite distinctive as a human, save for the textural aspect. When you look at a plantation, you know what that looks like. You know it's quite structured. You know the way that the trees look. And so that's really how our algorithm is able to do that, is we've taught it how to look at land use changes based on how normal changes look over time and based on the changes in the texture as well.
Well, I hope that answers this question. And then we have a few ones around the legal assessment here. Maybe let's start with one that I've seen in the chat. Sorry, give me 1 second. Where was it? So the question was kind of, your demonstration was centered on geolocation compliance, but how about the local legal compliance? Maybe you can, I mean, you've kind of shown it in the tool, but maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where things like our questionnaire comes in. So that's a questionnaire that's been drafted by CMS as our partner that we're working with, that really covers all the different aspects of the regulation in terms of both what's the information we need for Article 9 for proving compliance with local law of production, and also considerations for Article 10 in terms of risk assessment. So that's wrapped up in our questionnaire there. And then you can see also we have those associated statuses, that some of those are specific to CMS, and they're about them performing the assessment and sort of having made an assessment of the risk there.
Yeah, makes sense as well. And then I think there is like a combined question, a bit about the legal side of things, but also again about the integration with traces.
Yeah, it's a great question. So from a technical perspective, it's much simpler to submit as an authorized representative. So that's the reason that we've taken that approach. It really simplifies the technical aspect for our users and makes it much easier to work with that way. So that's why, both from a technical and a legal perspective, we think that is the much simpler way of doing it. And challenges integrating with EU traces, I think, Patrick, you very kindly and incorrectly said that I built this platform. I didn't build anything. I'm not a developer, but our developers could tell you about some of the challenges with traces. Absolutely. You know, one of the challenges is that it does take 5 or so minutes for a due diligence statement to be submitted before you get back a reference and a verification number. The challenges around that are, of course, if you run a just-in-time operation and you need that number before something leaves your warehouse, that's not going to be possible. So when you think about how you structure your compliance program, it's worth thinking about how that might work, how you might allow for that time to be able to get that information before it goes out the door. I also know that it's also quite interesting reading the recent update to the FAQs as well. And I know that there's been some conversation about the aspect of producing due diligence statements annually. One of the limitations that remains in place is the 25 megabyte limitation on geolocations that can be added to a due diligence statement. And you can hit that quite easily, I would say. And so if you really band a lot of geolocations together under a single due diligence statement, then you do run the risk of hitting that upper limit, I would say.
Yeah, maybe a quick one in between, again about the risk assessment done by CMS.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I won't speak too much on CMS's behalf, but I know as lawyers they would say it depends. And naturally it depends on the type of content, and they do engage their partners as well there, to they're sort of partner firms, either sort of other parts of CMS that have international operations, or partners that they have in other countries, so that they can ensure that compliance with local law of production. So it does depend a little bit on that, but they do have quite a large operation naturally, a good few thousand lawyers there. So it is, of course, a person reviewing it, so it is going to take a little longer, but in terms of having something that's very, very robust from a decision perspective, it's the best thing you could do.
Yeah, Lisa, I hope this answers the question. And then I think we have one that has been has been asked before as well. Sorry, clicking and speaking at the same time is hard for me, apparently. But maybe I know we have a couple of slides on it, and maybe we can send them afterwards. But maybe you can explain kind of the privacy thing a bit more, because I remember in Piero's session, people were wondering, like, yeah, but if this data is kept private, like how can I see it in general? Like what is private, what is not private here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I didn't demo it because it's actually quite tricky by the time you have 3 accounts to actually be able to show it on one computer. But basically the way this works is that for supply chain, you can only see one level up and one level down, basically from where you are. So I can see the information of the direct buyer that I'm related to and the direct supplier that I'm related to. So the way that works for plots is that the plot information, which is a core component of what you need for compliance with the EUDR, we take all the plots in that supply chain and roll them up and show them at the level of the direct supplier that you're sourcing from. So say if in the demo that I gave, if you looked at Green Canopy Oils, if they were buying from another company and they'd sent a request for geolocations from them, then you as the person buying only from Green Canopy Oils would see all of the plots that they'd requested from their sub-suppliers, but only the information of your direct supplier in terms of the email and the contact information and things like that. That was a decision we took quite early on when we, as I'm sure as Pierre has also mentioned, with some of the work that we've done around interactions with the industry, industries affected by this regulation. One of the big concerns was how you get supplier engagement if they're going to expose data that can potentially lead to them being, if you expose your supplier information, maybe there's the risk that you end up being cut out of a supply chain. So that was something that's very consciously built into this, that we maintain that privacy.
Yeah, I hope again this provided some clarity here, and then an interesting question. So I've already made you kind of a developer today. Maybe you can also become a salesperson here.
It's a great advantage of that's a great advantage of the role of product is you can always just defer that it's not your role. But no, as the commercial perspective, who pays for the software? The primary person who pays for the software is anybody who's sort of using the operator or trader experience. Really, it's if you want to submit due diligence statements, perform risk assessments, do precision analysis. Those are all of the paid features on our application. We don't charge suppliers to use the platform unless, for whatever reason, they want to use some of those premium features. Again, that's very much a conscious thing about supplier engagement. That the simpler and we make it for suppliers to engage on the platform, the easier it's going to make it for operators to be able to get that information and pass it forward. So we're really focused on a lot of the premium features are around actually the compliance aspect of the regulation rather than the data gathering side, which we make free.
Yeah, I think that was another question as well, like the difference between our free version and the paid version.
Yeah, well, the free version is mostly focused on a couple of things. One is you can log on, you can add plot data, you can get a basic assessment against the JRC map, which is very useful for understanding the sort of baseline potential risk that might be in a supply chain. You can send requests to suppliers and sub-suppliers. The commercial network is completely free to use. And then if you're connected with somebody who is a paying user, you can also respond to surveys as well, to those questionnaires. So really a lot of value you can get in that free version. You can also invite your teammates to collaborate with you on that information in the free version. You can so you can get a lot of initial value of understanding the potential underlying risk that may be in your supply chain on the free version, for sure.
Yeah, I've just shared the link as well in case you guys are interested. You can basically register again for free. And then, so luckily, a few of my colleagues have answered a few questions in the chat, but maybe one or two last ones that we are missing here. So we are hopping a bit from pricing to data collection back and forth, but this one is still open, I think.
Yeah, that's a good question. At the minute, it's a field on our API, and we're going to add it into the user interface very soon. But it is a field that it's possible to add that information from the API side. Yeah, and by the way, all of our documentation on the how our API functions as well. You can also see that if you sign up for a trial of Light. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have two more questions regarding prices. So the one question is the software by TradeAware pocket friendly? I think it depends on your pocket, right? But on a more serious note, I think it's quite competitive. And then we had another question about costs when it comes to CMS. Where is it again? It's this one.
I mean, this is a good question. So, I mean, I think yes, there is a cost of a sort of a supplier check from CMS. That's something that you know, it is a service that's being provided by one of the leading law firms, so there is naturally a cost associated with that. But in terms of what the regulation asks you to do in assessing legality with local law of production, that is really the best thing you could do, of having a law firm that has that global presence and global understanding to be able to assess that. And it's also naturally something as well that you can take a bit of a risk-based approach to as well. You know, maybe you don't want to send all of your suppliers to CMS because some of them you think represent a very low risk. And so there's a lot of flexibility around that in terms of which suppliers you would do that for. But certainly, if you look at what the regulation asks you to do, and in terms of looking at getting that adequately conclusive and verifiable information of compliance with the local law of production, for most companies who don't, or perhaps sourcing from other countries who, you know, don't know what an Indonesian title deed might look like, or you know, whatever it may be, it's certainly helpful to have a firm like CMS there who can provide that value.
Yeah, and then obviously we have to ask this kind of question because I mean, you're living in Berlin, but as people might have heard, you are from the UK, so probably your fellow people from the UK were wondering about this.
Yes, hello, UK, I guess. But yeah, that's certainly something you can do with our platform. I saw a couple of questions about the EUDR perspective as well. There's the possibility, if you're a third country like the UK, that you can get an EUDR by having contact with one of the individual sort of import authorities, customs authorities, to obtain that. So you could, in theory, do the DDS yourself, but using this software as well is also a way that you can pass the information for the DDS to the people who you're selling to in Europe as well. And then, of course, there's some complexities around the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, that you can get a DDS, you can get an EUDR specifically for Northern Ireland for imports that are crossing the border there. But yeah, we can certainly help with that.
That sounds good. And then maybe I have kind of a last question here. Again, I think we answered a lot, but no worries, the rest we will answer via mail. But if you kind of have one last final advice for the people who basically stayed during the whole day, we have asked this kind of question to everyone, but would love to hear your final advice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I were to take a final piece of advice, I think if you've stayed the whole day, you've probably seen you've probably seen a great deal of the complexity involved in compliance with the EUDR. You know, as Patrick mentioned, I've been in the regulatory space for quite some time with things like GDPR and LIBOR and margin reform, and it's natural to leave things to the last minute because you know, you don't sort of get any points for being early when it comes to these things, aside from the significant headache you save yourself down the line. But I would say make sure not to leave it too late and to get started. I mean, I don't know if this is I think this is a German expression, Patrick, right? Alle Anfänge schwer. All beginnings are difficult, right? And and so taking the first step is certainly a way to go, and looking at some of the tools that are out there to understand what the risk profile of your supply chain looks like, to know how much effort you might want to invest down the line, or just really good, no regret beginnings that you can take.
Yeah, I think we have kind of heard this advice during the day quite often, and I think we need to stress it even more. But yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, Chris, and for answering a lot of questions here. Before all of you guys are leaving, let me have some final words, so to say. Again, I want to thank all of you for attending. It was, well, a lot of fun, I would say, considering this topic. We've actually learned a lot during the day, and I just want to recap a few things here. So first of all, because the question came up in every single session, yes, you will receive the recording. Basically, tomorrow morning, right? You will get an email. You can access all the sessions again whenever you want. For kind of the rest of your life. They will be online. Yes, we will answer all the questions that are still there, right, in our EUDR novel. I think we would actually call it like that. Then also, if you are very interested in TradeAware, which would obviously be nice to us, some of my colleagues are still in the virtual booth. So if you leave this session here and then basically click on the menu and click on booth, you can join Stephen or Scott or Vihan, or if you're interested in a partnership, you can join Magda's booth. Again, they're all pretty nice. You can just join in, start talking to them, ask all the questions you want. Obviously, if you want to do it later on or with a colleague, just go basically to our website and send in the contact form. We will answer there as well. If you want to learn even more about the EUDR, which I think all of us kind of need to do, we have linked a few resources here in the event as well. Again, when the session is over, you can still enter kind of the resources page, so to say. I can only recommend you going through, well, the buyer's guide we just published, right? If you're like further down the road in your decision on what kind of tool you may want to use. We have a more general handbook on the EUDR as well. And from personal experience, I can highly recommend the EUDR Institute as well. It's a partner of LiveEO, but basically there you can find very, very detailed courses about the EUDR, again, about the different roles and so on. You will get a nice certificate in the end as well. I think there's a free one, but there are also a bit more extensive paid ones. If you use the code LiveEO, you get a discount, but again, this will be stated in the email as well. And yeah, again, thank you so much for attending. Thanks to all of the speakers, if they are still here. Thanks again to Chris, and then we will hopefully see a lot of you now at the booth talks, and well, you will receive some emails from LiveEO in the future. All right, that's it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Patrick. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye.